Hi there, greetings from Cologne. This is Jacob's Guitar Channel, and yeah, today I want to do something about the Line6 Helix again, focusing on a rather unsung amp from rock's history. Back in the 70s, well, everyone remembers there were the Marshall Plexis, the big Fender amps and everything, and today we're not going to focus on them, we're going to focus on a different piece of equipment. We're going to focus on the Hiwatt DR103, which is modeled in the Helix with a very telling name, the Hiwatt. I actually had a look at which guitar players use the DR103, and well, that is quite an impressive name list, out of which I picked 4 guitar players, namely David Gilmour, Pink Floyd of course, Pete Townshend of The Who, because well, you cannot talk about the Hiwatt amps without mentioning him. Robert Fripp of King Crimson, who is one of my favorite guitar players, and Tommy Bolin of Deep Purple, and he played in the Bill Cobham band afterwards, who also used Hiwatt DR103s for the most time of his career. And doing my research, a very popular combination in the 1970s was the Big Muff fuzz pedal and the Hiwatt DR103, and many iconic sounds of the second half of the 70s were recorded that way. So let's go straight over to the first guitar player we're going to cover today, which is David Gilmour, Pink Floyd's guitar player. He actually used almost exclusively Hiwatt DR103s, and starting with Animals, and ever since he got his fuzz tone from the Big Muff P. And I think one of the most iconic David Gilmour sounds can be found on The Wall, the famous guitar solo, and that is actually very typical how David uses the amp and the fuzz in front and the volume control on his guitar to produce his sound. Because if you just plug a Big Muff in front of a DR103, that's going to be one big fizzy, fuzzy, rock and roll, almost metal-like distortion, and that's absolutely not the right tone for doing Pink Floyd thingies. So what David did, he always rolled back the guitar volume. You only seldom hear him with full guitar volume through the Big Muff. And yeah, the second thing, of course, David was famous for were these kind of shimmering delay things he did with the Roland Space Echo, which was also very popular with Hiwatt users, because Robert Fripp used to have one too. Yeah, and that is, I think, captured in the beginning of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, these iconic 4 tones everybody knows and everybody tries to keep working out which chord that actually is. I just think we have to let them float in the air and stuff. Yeah, so that's going to be the first sound example. I'm going to demonstrate, well, I'm not doing exactly the solo, not on any piece in this video, just the vibe of it, a few licks which are popular, and you get the vibe. And I'm trying first to emulate the sound of the Another Brick in the Wall guitar solo, and after that I'm going to play the iconic riff from Shine On You Crazy Diamond. So you get the picture how I did the sounds. And actually, of course, for all the sounds you're hearing today, you can download the Helix preset on Custom Tone. The link is just below in the video description. I actually use stock caps. I mixed 2 microphones, which I always do. I always mix a Ribbon 160 with an SM57 or a 421 dynamic microphone to get a very good sound of the stock caps in the Helix. And yeah, I think I've talked a lot now, but let's delve over, and I'm going to play you some Pink Floyd then. back on my beautiful balcony in beautiful Cologne. Weather's still okay, so that was some Pink Floyd for you. I think in the demonstration you heard two things of which the Hiwatt is capable of doing. It can take pedals very well. You heard all the nuances of the fuzz. You heard, well, the subtle changes a rollback guitar volume can bring. You heard the little nuances in my playing, if there were any. But it's really touch sensitive. That is great with the Hiwatts. And the other thing a Hiwatt can do very, very well is, well, you've heard that in the Shine On You Crazy Diamond bit. It can produce nice shimmering cleans. They're beautiful. The cleans of a Hiwatt are beautiful. And it could do that at a very, very loud volume. And that was actually a selling point in the early 70s, because when you were a guitar player playing with a very big band, playing big venues, you needed a very loud guitar amps, or several very loud guitar amps, because back in the day, these amps wouldn't be mic'd up. The audience just heard the guitar amp. It was not sent over the PA, just the vocals were on the PA, not the guitar amp. And so you needed a very loud guitar amp. And, well, of course, there was a market for guitar amps which could produce loud cleans. Very loud guitar amps actually are appealing to Mr. Pete Townshend. He played very, very loud, yeah. And he adopted the Hiwatt in 1968 because it was very reliable, very loud, and gave him the sound he was looking for. If you take any classic Who records of the 70s, you will not hear the Hiwatt. In the studio, Pete recorded with a Fender Bandmaster. Joe Welch gave it to him, if I remember correctly. And he loved the tone of that with a Country Gentleman by Gretsch guitar. Yeah. He did not use the Hiwatt. He did not use any of his guitars which we associate today with Pete Townshend in that period. But live, of course, he played the Hiwatts exclusively. And the Who live, yeah, live at Leeds. It's such a great album. I bought it when I was 12 or 13, and I had started playing guitar just then. And I put it on my father's stereo, and I was just, what a brilliant guitar sound. This is such a brilliant guitar sound, and I still think that today. Live at Leeds is one of the greatest guitar sounds ever. It's loud. Pete turned the input volume on the Hiwatt all the way up, and he just plugged his SG into it, and he controlled the overdrive with the guitar volume, and his playing. It's very dynamic. The amp is very dynamic as well. It's so beautiful, and if he just keeps rocking those big chords, it's a great guitar sound. And I actually tried to emulate that sound. One thing I did was I turned the bias all the way up, making the digital tubes of the model in the Helix very hot, so they produce even more overdrive, even richer overdrive. I'm not sure Pete messed with his tubes or the bias of his tubes, I don't know. But it sounded more like him. It sounded hotter, bigger, and louder. And here come the Who. Ears still ringing? Yeah, it's great guitar sound. Just a guitar, an amp, turn everything up. Very cool. Third guitarist on my list today is Robert Fripp, which is one of my personal favorite guitar players. I really love King Crimson. I've seen him live loads of times, and he used an Hiwatt DR 103 for, well, almost all of the 70s. And Robert once was quoted saying, "I can get my sound out of any amp as long as I've got any fuzz box in front of it." That was pretty much, or is pretty much, Robert's attitude towards equipment. He's never really talking about, "Oh, I use that kind of guitar strings and that guitar pick is brilliant and you should buy it." He doesn't do that. He always focuses on the playing. He focuses on a certain sound aesthetic he's got in his head, and well, he realized actually that kind of sound aesthetic in the 1970s with a Big Muff P and a Hiwatt DR 103. And of course, the Big Muff in Robert's hands sounds much more distorted, more metally almost. Of course, King Crimson is light years away from being a metal band, but it sounds more aggressive, of course, than David Gilmour's Big Muff P. Yeah, and that's actually all I have to say before just going over and showing you some King Crimson. You need really thick, distorted sound out of Big Muff P, and the Hiwatt's going to amplify that beautifully because it takes the pedal so well, and it has these great highs which make a little fizz on top of this distortion, and you get that really fat sound on Red, which I always love. I love the record Red. After that, Robert disbanded the band, and when he refounded King Crimson in the early 80s, he and the other guitar player he then recruited, Adrian Belew, they switched to Roland Jazz Chorus amplifiers, ending the era of Hiwatt and King Crimson. Listen now to that great fuzz tone he's got on there, and that was done with a Hiwatt and a Big Muff. If I say guitar in Deep Purple, you say Ritchie Blackmore, Marshall Stax, and Fender Stratocaster, and right you are. But Ritchie wasn't the only guitar player in Deep Purple. He left the band, I think, after Stormbringer, mid-70s, and was replaced by Tommy Bolin. Tommy Bolin is not so famous as Ritchie Blackmore, is not as famous as any of the other guitar players I'm featuring in this video, but he's a great guitar player. He did one album with Deep Purple called Come and Taste the Band, and he did one album with Billy Cobham called Spectrum, which is one of the best jazz albums. You should definitely go and buy the Billy Cobham album. And I really loved his playing. I was not much, and I am still not much, into Come Taste the Band. I think it's a rather mediocre album for such an excellent band as Deep Purple, but I think the guitar playing is brilliant. I can just listen to this record focusing on the guitar playing and say, oh, I like how that guy plays. A little bit bluesy, a little bit jazzy thing, and then of course his record with Billy Cobham's a brilliant jazz album. Just blows you away, these grooves and the very cool guitar sound he's got, and the great solo he plays almost every piece of the record. And Tommy Bolin actually produced his sound very unusually. He turned the treble and the presence control on his amp all the way down, so it sounds going to be pretty dark. And then he took an old fuzz box by a company called London, if I remember correctly. That's not modeled in the Helix. I kept the Big Muff P as the fuzz box in my preset, and I used the Big Muff P, and I did what Tommy did with a different fuzz, of course. I turned up the tone on the fuzz, and then you've got the balance with the very dark sounding amp, because you've turned treble and presence down, and you get the fuzz really bright sounding by the tone control on the fuzz, and that produces a very unusual distortion. And if you listen to it alone, it might sound a little bit strange, but in a mix, it simply sits. It's perfect in a mix. It's just the frequencies you need. It's got all the musical information an electric guitar has, and Tommy plays brilliant guitar.